Dice!
You're using them too much, but it's not just dice that are the problem. I'll explain why and what to do about it, even to those of you who love to embrace the chaos and relinquish control to the whims of fate. I got a 3. What I go over in this video is, of course, just one lens to view things through, just like this excellent book, The Art of Game Design, A Book of Lenses by Jesse Schell. I love the idea that we can try on a lens and for a moment see the world through a completely different viewpoint. And we will come back to this later as a fantastic reference for our game design, which is what we're doing as game masters. We are designing games, and these are a really enjoyable part of that. They're just fun to roll. The sound, the anticipation. But maybe these things aren't really to blame for the fun. Queen Ginny has talked about rolling less often, Uncle Matt has talked about when to roll, but I want to cover something else. What I want to talk about is why. That's my constant refrain here at Mossy Antler, because I think the why questions get us closer to meaning. By the way, hi, I'm Grant Breeze, and this place is Mossy Antler, where we find meaning in our games. So why are we rolling these? What do they do to us? When are they magic, and when do they throw us under the bus? Dice are great, and I love to see what happens when they roll. Can you hear a butt coming? But they can cause problems. Yes, they can produce spontaneous and hilarious moments at the table, but they can also be the source of lackluster and unsatisfying moments in our sessions. I'll dive into that, but before I do, I want to zoom out a little bit. Like in general, what is the point of play? Remember when you were a little kid and you made up games all the time? Were you anything like me and had house rules for every board game you could get your hands on? My current playgroup doesn't really do that with our board games, and it kind of makes me sad. I don't want to forget that feeling of free creation by taking my games too seriously. And you might think that's a point in favor of randomness, like embrace your inner child and bring the chaos. But I love that the rules exist because they give us a structure for play. That's what I was doing as a kid, creating new structures to see how they felt. Under the lens of fun, Jesse Schell quotes a variety of definitions of play. Like, play is manipulation that indulges curiosity, and play is free movement within a rigid structure. And I like that. Let's take a look at a structure in the form of a table from the classic and well-regarded Curse of Strahd. This is the Daytime Random Encounters in Barovia table. Maybe something fun happens, like the PCs encounter some scouts on the road or have a little battle to deal with. But maybe they find a trinket or a hunting trap. What is the point of that? Is it like a little vignette? Because I have a lot of those already in my games without needing to roll on a table like this. Maybe you can make up something on the fly to make it compelling, but if you've ever used one of these tables and nothing came of it, you're not alone. And the players tend to attach themselves to it more than is warranted. Yes, that's just a regular dagger. No, it's not magic. No, nothing will happen if you cut yourself with it. Now put it down. And I'm not going to get myself even more riled up by talking about the Wild Magic Surge table. It's an even worse offender of this. That thing is bad. So what's going on? Why are some rolls fun and others fall completely flat? Well, when you're rolling is a big part of it. The Barovia Encounters table is randomness at the start, at the setup. The main resolution mechanic of the game, which would be a d20 plus modifier in D&D, 2d6 plus a trait in Powered by the Apocalypse, or a dice pool in Blades of the Dark, all happen at the end. In game design, this is known as input randomness and output randomness. Input randomness is the event happening before the player makes a decision. Draw 5 cards, what you get is random. And you'd think that'd be the most fun because it's not the cards you're dealt, it's how you play them. We'll see about that. Output randomness, on the other hand, is the player makes a decision and then the randomness happens. The DM says, the inscribed magic runes grow violet with power. You feel a magical pulse coming from them. The player says, since my character has encountered draconic magic before, can I sense if that's what's coming from these runes? And the DM says, make an Arcana check. The player and the DM make a decision together, and then the roll happens. In video games and board games, having output randomness like this can be a huge cause of frustration. You put all this work into a decision only to have a bad random outcome. Have you ever rage quit? But that's not really how it works in tabletop RPGs. With the main resolution mechanic, we are rolling to find out what happens next in the story. In our Barovia table example, the GM is the player making the decision, and the random roll happens before the next bit of story takes place. But this structure goes against the story we're telling. Let's understand why, and then I'll show you what to do about it. If you've had random tables go well for you in the past, you're probably thinking, no, these rolls provide the story. But try on this lens. It's the lens of chance. Does the randomness give players positive feelings of excitement and challenge, or does it give them negative feelings of hopelessness and lack of control? Risk and randomness are like spices. A game without any hint of them can be completely bland, but put in too much and they overwhelm everything else. I think we can go further than that. Spices are not added to a dish randomly, but if they're included thoughtfully and deliberately, they can make a dish sing. Let's use a different metaphor. Imagine a Jenga tower already set up. Each placement of the next block might cause it to topple over. Output randomness. That's exciting. Tension, then release. Dumping all those Jenga blocks onto the table and then quickly trying to assemble something that is hopefully interesting is input randomness. Release and then tension? That's generally unsatisfying. Tension and then release is just about the most basic building block of story you can think of. A more elaborate version is in the somewhat famous story circle. A character needs something, they go forth to look for it, they find it, take it, and return back to where they started from, changed from the experience. The woman was thirsty and found an old can of Coke on the side of the road. She picked it up, cracked it open and drank it, and then threw up because it was expired. It's the difference between a story and an anecdote. Have you ever been in the kitchen and randomly saved a utensil from falling by kicking at the exact right moment? It's funny for those who see it, but if you tell somebody about it later, you end up wanting to say, you had to be there. Ugh. Don't get it twisted, story can absolutely be structured around random events though. I was almost run off the road turns into the other car sped up behind me for no discernible reason, whipped into the other lane, and nearly rammed into me as I swerved out of the way. Which one do you find more compelling? What I'm talking about here is replacing randomness with purposeful story beats. Something you might have seen in various places online is people saying that putting your game into a structured story is railroading. You won't see it in the comments because I'll delete those comments unless they're really thoughtful and kind. We will talk about railroading in depth in a future video and in a way that I haven't ever seen anywhere online before, so you can subscribe to stick around to see that. But for now, I'll say while story structures can limit player choice, that's generally a good thing. Everything you do as a GM limits player choice. The words that you say to draw focus on details or point in a particular direction, the setting or your world building limits what the players can interact with. What you prepped for the session or the adventure vastly limits what the players can choose to do. We don't play with a completely blank canvas. Story arcs are no exception to this, and at times can be more useful than anything else we create in our games. Quinns from the RPG review channel Quinns Quest puts this so eloquently.
We have spent decades arguing about dice systems, experience points, world building and railroading. We have spent hardly any time at all thinking about the most basic tenets of storytelling. I'm talking, what are the building blocks of a good character? What are the shapes stories traditionally take? What do you need to have a satisfying ending? Now, I'm not saying we have to be good at any of those things. RPGs focused on simulationism or just raw chaos have a charm all of their own. But in some ways, when people get disheartened at what they perceive as the qualitative gap between what happens at their table and what they see on the best actual play shows, it's not a massive gulf in talent that creates that distance. It's simply that the people who make actual play often have a basic grasp on the tenets of storytelling.
That's so good. You gotta watch his review of the game Slug Blasters. I'll put it below and on the end card so you can watch it after this. Story gives things shape in our minds. We can't really understand random, and that's why it often feels silly. It breaks continuity. If you're not used to thinking this way, you can start paying attention to the story beats in your life. The day has a cycle. You tend to eat at certain times. Our conversations have patterns. They aren't random, they're filled with things we care about, and they have a beginning, middle, and end. and that's unavoidable. Stories are inherent to our thinking because they are the most human thing. More so than tools that our ancient ancestors used to leverage our environment, more so than language, which developed so we could communicate better, and I think more so than our social tendencies. Other animals can use tools and communicate and socialize. The difference is they can't convey the information of their own experience through anything other than passing along their genes. They have to rely on instinct alone. We don't. Stories are how we relate to each other. They're the thing that nothing else can do. So let's talk about how we might add story structures into our game so it keeps things moving forward and stays compelling. I only have time to go over a few ideas in this video, but you can be sure we'll come back to this at some point. The first step to develop some of these story muscles is to just start deciding instead of rolling, either during prep or at the table during play. Ask, what is the most dramatic thing to happen? Ah! If you've ever fudged a die roll, you already know what I'm talking about. Either you really needed your monster to hit, or you really needed them to not hit. This is why Powered by the Apocalypse systems, which are story-focused, generally don't have the GM roll dice. Instead, the GM chooses from a list of actions that lead into the next story beat. The idea is that your instincts are going to be more captivating than luck's intrusion. And that points to output randomness being just as likely a culprit of dull outcomes. If you've ever had a lore drop ready only to have a player fail a history check, you know what I'm talking about. One way to get around this is built into the system Blades in the Dark. Tiers of success tied to levels of risk determines an interesting outcome. It's not just pass-fail, usually something else happens. You could hack something like this into the system you're playing now, print out a system-neutral version to reference. I made that for you, link in the doobly-doo. Or try out the entire Blades system as your next campaign. I'm running a sci-fi version of Blades in the Dark right now called Scum and Villainy, and you can read about that and steal my adventure ideas for it by supporting me on Patreon at the Lycan level, because maybe you've taken a liking to me. There's even a free tier if you just want the occasional update. I'm asking you to mix things up and try something outside of your comfort zone, because that's how we grow. And I've seen the impact of it in my own games. Approach your next session as a fairy tale or a crime drama or some other third thing that I can't possibly know because it's specific to your own weird tastes. And, don't get too attached to them because we play to find out. Once you've set up the story beats, you can lean back and let the players do the guiding. You can always fall back on random rolls if you need to, but try to have a more authorial voice upon the game world. Not to override any player decisions, those you try to make work. You make problems for them to solve, and then you solve their solutions. Tension, release. Dice rolling is leaving things up to chance, to forces beyond our control. And that does sound pretty cool and can sometimes be useful, but it's not really why I'm sitting at the table. I play RPGs with my friends to create and be challenged and to overcome odds and to experience the incredible range of human emotions. Dice leave things in the cold, unfeeling hands of fate. And sometimes you want that, but story is human. That's it. If you like my shirt, you can get your own and other cool shirts at mossyantler.com. Now go tell some compelling stories. And remember, there's always a path forward. Now go find it. What a mess.